Welcome everyone to another End Times Bible study. Tonight we are going through what we're calling the Final Empire. So since we covered a lot of ground in the last two sessions, we'll do like a quick little reminder. So as we've seen, God has a sixfold purpose for the nation of Israel and the Jewish people. Specifically to finish the transgression, to make an end of sin, to make atonement for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy place. So that is the sixfold purpose found in Daniel 24. It's accomplished during a divine timeline, which is a period of 70 weeks or 490 years. At center stage of this sixfold purpose and divine timeline is the nation of Israel and the Jewish people. They are at the center of everything that Daniel is prophesying. So they are kind of our signers. Finally, the instrument God uses to refine, purify, purge, prepare, and judge Israel and the Jewish people are four worldwide empires. So that was last week. It was the four empires. As we've seen, the 483 years have already been accomplished as God used Babylon, Media Persia, Greece, and Rome. And the final 7 years of this prophecy, God will complete his sixfold purpose for Israel by using a revived Roman Empire and the Antichrist Empire. So that's where we're really going to find the majority of tonight is that those last two. Revelation 17, 9 through 11 reveals that these empires are numerically called the seventh and the eighth kingdoms. The picture that I sent you summarizes the four empires revealed by Daniel and the seventh and the eighth kingdoms revealed by John. So that is set up in the image of the statue. And I have some dates on there for you. So in the dream and in the vision, there was a head of gold, the breast of silver, the thighs of brass, the legs of iron. That would be Babylon, Mid-Persia, Greece, and Rome. And then the seventh and the eighth kingdom, those are the feet of iron and clay in the photo at the bottom, and then the toes of iron and clay, that is the Antichrist Empire, that's the eighth kingdom. Oh, it's going crazy. The noise this is making. I'm so sorry. So, as we're going to talk about in the next session that I do, I'll try it up here. Maybe I won't catch my breath. The seventh kingdom is going to be characterized by tolerance, manipulated unity, humanistic love, soulish compassion, and false justice. All of that sounds really good, unless you know it's counterfeit, and you can kind of see it from a mile away. This kingdom is going to promise the world a utopia of peace, prosperity, equality. The religions of the world will unite, a global economy will flourish, and many nations are going to form a global government, also known as the one world government, bound together by laws, courts, and an army to enforce its legislation. Sometime after the seventh kingdom has been established, and I'm going to give you a little timeline here for that too, the Antichrist, as a world-renowned leader, will make this kingdom the marvel of the nations. Nevertheless, 3.5 years before Jesus Christ returns, the Antichrist and 10 kings will destroy the seventh kingdom and set up the eighth kingdom. It's like a little hostile takeover. Out with the old and with the new, now that we've got everyone's attention, they cannot help but show who they really are. Revelation 17, 16 through 17 is a good reference for that. And then chapter 13, 1 through 18 in Revelation. We're going to see the seventh kingdom being overthrown by the eighth kingdom. And then we get a little of that funny wording we talked about last time. The eighth kingdom is markedly different. There is going to be a drastic change in how they're ruling. It'll be a totalitarian regime which enforces its will through war. So we're going to go through worldwide peace, we're going to trust the leadership and the 10 kings, and then through war and forced submission, economic control through the mark of the beast, and mandated worship of the Antichrist. That is going to be how they reign. And it's very, very similar to what Daniel was seeing in his reality, not just his dreams and his visions. In that time, they were being forced to bow down to and worship the statue of the king of that kingdom. So when teachers and authors describe the Antichrist and his final empire, they often lump in the seventh and the eighth kingdoms together, and it gets really confusing because they're missing the interior point of a war where the harlot is destroyed. It usually results in a huge misunderstanding of whether or not there are two players being spoken about as leading the seventh kingdom or leading the eighth kingdom. And they're not warring against each other. It's a singular leader who kind of throws out the leadership and establishes a new totalitarian regime. And he does it by overthrowing the harlot. And we'll get there. So there's important distinctions between the two kingdoms that we need to understand. And I sent you a table. It's kind of hard to read. I'll go through it. And I detail some of the main differences between these two Antichrist kingdoms. If you want to think of them that way, it'll help you remember they are both led by the Antichrist. So you've got three columns here. Characteristic. So we're going to talk about duration, how it begins, how it's established, the religion, the government, the economy, Satan's goal. So the characteristics, then you've got of the seventh kingdom and of the eighth kingdom. If you can't read it, we'll just try to go through the way that makes the most sense. So the duration of the seventh kingdom is a short time. It can be between 5 and 20 years. It can be being set up right now. The eighth kingdom, the duration is 3.5 years. And I can share this chart in a way that you can use for study notes later. It's in my notes, so as soon as I share my notes, you'll have a clear picture of it. It was a set up as a chart and then moved it over today at the last minute, so I can't share it as a photo as easily. The seventh kingdom's beginning is going to be several decades before Jesus returns, which means when we say things like we're living in the last days or the end times, it's the parentheses around that is that the seventh kingdom is being established and built right now, whether we know it or not. The eighth kingdom's beginning is at the halfway point of the Great Tribulation, at 3.5 years before Jesus' return. So here's the stark difference between the two in terms of characteristics. One, as I just mentioned, tolerance, peace, prosperity, manipulated unity, humanistic compassion, and false justice. You don't have to write all those down. I have them for you. The eighth kingdom, watch how it turns upside down. Intolerance, war, state-controlled economy, forced submission, totalitarianism, and chaos. So that 3.5 year point is going to be unmistakable. It's not going to be like, oh, did you miss it? You didn't miss it. If you're living under a rock, they're going to come and kick the rock. That's what it's going to be like. So the seventh kingdom is going to be established by uniting the nations through a prosperous economy. Tolerant religion. There's a peace treaty going to be signed between Israel and the Arab nations. And common legislation, which is going to be like these universal rules that we all decide to live by. Everyone's going to agree the most successful civilizations all share these things in common. You're going to have like this global rollout of moral law. So that's how that's going to be established. It's going to be through peace and negotiation and appeal. And then the eighth kingdom is going to be established by conquering the nations through formidable military force and a controlled economy. So they're military police. We're one bad day away from martial law, the day after the election, right? One bad day. It can happen very quickly, that part, but we need to see the seventh kingdom unroll first, and then the leaders of that revealed. So we're not going to just jump right in when we see really bad stuff. We can't just jump right to, like, this must be the eighth kingdom. Well, we missed the global economy, we missed all of the announcement of peace, we missed the unity of the religions. So things are going to get bad, and they're just going to be precursors to the really bad. So religion, you're going to see in the seventh kingdom, you're going to see state-run church. And it merges together with Islam. I'm going to be talking about Islam, and we're going to be talking about Hebrew words and Arab words and how their number systems work and how there's some similarities of what's going on there. It's going to like really make some sense of where we keep the microscope in the end times. We're looking at certain big-time players, and those are people groups and religions, because we're going to see them come in through a merge of peace where there used to be animosity. It's prophesied, or let's say it's pre-written in the Quran that this is going to happen. It's written in our scriptures that it's going to happen. And that there's a certain amount of, like, the devil understands what's going to happen. And in the Quran's writings, it says instructionally to pretend like you're at peace until the war for jihad is announced. And to make friends with your neighbors so you can build trust, so then you can take them and their lives and their homes and their money and their wives. So there's like instructions, and then if they do reveal that they're Christians, you can crucify them upside down and cut off the right hand and the right foot. There's something that they're preparing for, but they know before they do, there's going to come a great time of peace. We're waiting for that in the seventh kingdom prophesied by Daniel. It's a tolerant religious system. And all the imams are going to say, peace. It's a time of peace. And what they mean is, be quiet while we sneak up on the camp. And there's going to be a common legislation, or a one world government. It's going to be a all agreed upon moral law. And it's going to pass right under the nose of Christians because it's all going to sound great. Can't we just get along? Right? I mean, you don't have time to get off my notes and into current events, but that's kind of happening. It's testing the waters right now. And then all of a sudden, you're going to have a military force that's now eliminating all religions except the Antichrist religion. The eighth kingdom is eliminating all other religions. So now that we've got everyone all getting along and kind of all going, well, let's not say Jesus, let's just say God. I've been in big events with Jews and Christians, and the leaders were like, for the sake of peace, let's just say God so that we don't cause our brothers to stumble. And I'm like, I'm not saying anything, but like, unless they believe in Jesus, are they brothers? If they died today and they didn't believe in Jesus, anyone that doesn't put their faith in Jesus but still claims God is missing the door. I am the door. I am the way. No one comes to the Father but through me. So there's only so much of peace and getting along that we can tolerate before it becomes like, no. When they're praying to Allah, they are not praying to my God. So that's where I draw the line. We're not going to just all get along and just all say God, and that's okay. So they're going to get everyone to try to play nice, and then they're going to go, well, now that we're all getting along and we're all this big new thing needs a king. And that king is going to show himself at the 3.5-year mark. So the government in the seventh kingdom is going to be a hybrid of socialism. This is another form of like everyone being fair, everyone getting along, keeping everything equal. It's going to be pitched to people with to give to the withouts. It's going to be pitched to the withouts to receive and respect the ones with. And it's going to be this corporatism where now we're just kind of all trying to level the playing field, and something that we haven't really seen yet, but we're starting to call technocracy. And it's going to come through your phones. So we have to really guard the gates in the end times, how much we're absorbing and how much we're believing and how much we're being sold a bill of goods about moralism and ethics and religion through other people we allow speaking to our lives from our hand. So that's where it's going to come from. That's technocracy. So then, flipping right over, 8th kingdom, 3.5 years into the Great Tribulation, it's when it all hits the fan, and totalitarian dictatorship just says, I'm the one that did this, I'm the one that brought all of this, I'm the one, and then so with signs and wonders, he's going to proclaim himself the Messiah. It's going to be the one the Jews have been waiting for. He will deceive the Jews. It'll be the one that Islam is waiting for. They're waiting for a Messiah, one also named Muhammad, or like the Muhammad. The Christians are going to be like, well, everybody else, and he's doing all these great things. And so if we put too much importance on signs and wonders within ministries, and they start to get away from the Word of God, they start to drift further away, and they start to emotionally manipulate, and you're drawn to the ministry because of the signs and wonders. Here's my end times warning to Spirit-filled believers. The Antichrist and the false prophet will deceive many with signs and wonders. So when they start to push away the Bible and say things like it's not the Father, the Son, and the Holy Bible, it's the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, and by the Holy Spirit we do all of these signs and wonders, I pray for ministries to not push the Bible so far away that they no longer accept it as guiding truth and the light for these days. We have to keep that apart, that Jesus is the Word. So he's not separate outside of the Trinity. The Word of God is Jesus. You should write it in. Anyway, they don't care what I have to say. Hybrid of socialism and capitalism is going to mark the economy of the seventh kingdom. It's going to be a big part of it, known as inclusive capitalism or stakeholder capitalism. Everybody gets a piece of the pie. And then that sets up a perfect transition for all of the elites to approve. 3.5 years in to great trouble, we're going to see the economy shift to state-run and state-controlled economy using the mark of the beast to regulate buying and selling. So then now everybody trusts the money people, and we see how the morality and the capitalism and the socialism has all really helped humanity. I mean, who could really say that's a bad thing? And then we learn to trust these people with the department of our lives called finance. And then they say, we've got a great idea. And we can't trust money. They're printing it everywhere. We can't trust coins. Those are fake. We can't trust credit cards. Those are too vulnerable. And they institute a system that allows you to not be duplicated. And that system is yet to be found. And every time some new technology comes out, we're like, oh, we're putting a chip in you, and we can tell 10 days ahead of time if you're going to have a heart attack. Like, all of that sounds great, right? I just talked about a heart attack, not money. But they got the chip in you. That's different than understanding this is controlling your money, you have to agree to it, and it is part of the worship that is found within the seventh kingdom into the eighth kingdom. We're already going to see this guy on the main stage. We're already going to see this stuff unfolding religiously. We're already going to see it starting to affect globally, the moralism. All of it starts to happen. We're going to know. I will get the chip if it saves my life. I'm not getting the chip if it controls my money. Probably two completely different things, and maybe just to be safe, I won't get chips in me, but that's where we're going. Because if you told a kid in 1987 you're going to have a computer in his pocket, those kids might be like, I didn't have no computer in my pocket, I'm a free bird. But guess what? They're not. They're all encaged.
That's
Blue
right.
screens lighting up their faces instead of the sun. So, Mark of the Beast is not going to be like a sneaky thing that Christians accidentally get, and now I can't go to heaven. That's not how it works. You're going to have to sign up for it. You're going to know. So, Satan's goal in all of this. The seventh kingdom, if I was the devil and I was trying to spin this strategy, it would be to intoxicate the nations and prepare them to worship an antichrist. Emotionalism, that's the intoxication. It just makes me feel so good, and I don't think I'm doing anything wrong. It's not like touching, it's not like looking, it's not like stealing, it's not like wanting, it's the experience.
It's all.
And all of a sudden it leads to all of that. Yeah. Emotionalism is the gateway drug
It
to
is
most
all of
other
that.
sins. So it's the on-ramp for worship of the Antichrist. Because he's such a great guy. And then halfway through the 7-year period, he receives worship from the nations through his proxy to the Antichrist. So, there is this thing that happens where this great person is going to be revered by the nations, and 10 major world influencers are going to get on his side. So, then at some point, there will be, in the 8th kingdom, in between the 7th, the transition between, I think, in the war with the harlot who's riding the beast. This character dies. Whether it's a real death or a fake death, doesn't matter to me, because it's going to come back to life. That's going to be the reality that the world perceives. And when he raises from the dead and proclaims himself God, the worship for the man begins. It's all a counterfeit pageantry of the real thing. And so you're going to be sitting back going, this is not real. And when they make a law that you cannot have a church or a gathering or a worship experience that has anything to do with any other religion but this guy, and now you've broken the law, the global law they've already established is just going to add some pieces to it. And then the ones that say, no way, we're not doing that, will be at war and at enmity with the Antichrist, and the kingdoms and the nations will rise against nations. Scripture, to help with this, is Revelation 17 and 18, talks about the 7th kingdom. And then Revelation 13 talks about the 8th kingdom. So the response for what's going to happen in the 7th kingdom, as you guessed it, the nations will unite and they will align themselves with the one world economy and the one world religion and the one world government. And I get the question all the time. I don't think America is so much of a rebel. And I don't even think Trump can keep us out of this negotiation because he likes a good deal. So if it happens really soon, it could be a guy like him or a guy he grooms. So it could come from our camp, our side, our team, politically. It could very easily come from, it could come from the other side. There's not going to be a Republican or a Democrat that's going to stop this coming. The only ones that are going to know are those crazy Bible-thumping Christians that have been studying this. They're the only ones that are going to say, oh, I don't think we should give up our Constitution to get along and stop worldwide war forever. And they're just going to be like, we love war. It's going to be so inflammatory. It's going to be dividing the country. We'll probably see a civil war here. That's not Revelation. Anyway, let's get back to this. With all of these distinctions in mind, let's look at how the seventh and the eighth kingdoms will rise to prominence and power. So the rise of the seventh and the eighth kingdoms is in Daniel 7:24. It talks about a really important truth about the iron kingdom. It says, as for the 10 horns, out of this kingdom 10 kings will arise, and another will arise after them, and he will be different from the previous ones and will subdue the 3 kings. Not the 3 kings. Subdue 3 kings. So it goes from 10 to 3. Oh, excuse me, 10 to 7. So if you look at it carefully, along with some other scriptures, it describes 5 phases of the 4th kingdom of iron, and the 7th and the 8th kingdoms mentioned in Revelation 17. Here's the phrases. A revised Roman Empire, 10 kings arise, the Antichrist arises, the Antichrist and 10 kings reign, and the Antichrist subdues 3 kings. So in the timeline, those are chronological. You've got a revived Roman Empire, then you've got 10 kingdoms, 10 kings. Then the Antichrist rises, but you don't know it's him, or maybe you do. Then the Antichrist and 10 kings start to plot their world takeover. They become successful. And then the Antichrist takes out 3 kings. So, in that scripture, Daniel 7:24, notice the phrase, out of his kingdom. This means that the kingdom is established before the 10 kings arise out of it in the end times. So when the Western Roman Empire fell in 476 AD, the prophecy of the end time Iron Kingdom was shelved for a season. But if you fast forward over 1400 years to 1950, when the European Union began to form, we see the beginning of the revived Roman Empire. After 2 bloody and costly world wars fought in Europe, influential leaders united to establish peace and prosperity between the neighboring nations, and the European Union. Everyone was watching it going, this is it, this is the end, this is what we've been waiting for. And they started to pick out 10 people, and they started to look at the British Empire, and it was just going craziness because it really looked like fulfillment of prophecy. 1950, the European coal and steel community began bringing together European countries economically and politically to secure lasting peace and prosperity. 1957, so there's your 7 years. People are like, did it happen? Is it coming? Is it going to pop up? In 1957, the Treaty of Rome created the European Economic Community called the EEC, known also as the Common Market. People pointed at that and said, this is the global economy starting to take off. The EEC worked towards creating a common currency and a financial system for a united Europe. This led to the launch of the EU in 1958, when the 6 founding countries, Belgium, France, Germany, Italy, Luxembourg, and Netherlands, aligned to promote peace and prosperity in the region. That looked like the ramp up, like, oh, here we go, everybody's getting together. One interesting fact to note that Israel was reborn in 1948, and after 1,800 plus years of desolation, then a few years later, as soon as that happened, a few years later, the EU was established. I don't think this is a coincidence. Remember, Daniel's 70-week prophecy stipulates that the Jewish people must dwell in the land. And that's before the pause button was released. So that's why we've got timeline in the 50s. Here we are, 2024. have to look back and say, are they in their land? Because otherwise you can pick lots of historical events, but if it's not within the context of the Jews occupying Israel, then you have to throw it out. At the same time they were being revived, the Roman Empire was awakened after centuries of lying dormant. So all of a sudden, Israel's back in their land, the Jewish people are returning, they're considered a country, and bam, the Roman Empire starts to reignite. You can see some of the map, the European Union, in one of the maps called blue. Those are the current members. Might be interesting to look at. If you don't like history, we'll get through quick here. So, a few years after Israel recaptured the city of Jerusalem, 1967, Denmark, Ireland, and the United Kingdom joined the EU, January 1st, 1973, raising the member states to 9. So then they're like, as soon as there's 10 major players, we're thinking this is it. Then there's going to be an Antichrist who rises up, leads the whole group. And, everyone just points at whoever's in power. It's Reagan. So, 8 years later, Greece joins the EU in 1981, becoming the 10th member. And in 1986, Spain and Portugal brought the total members to 12. And after the collapse of communism in Central and Eastern Europe, the EU grew tighter. 1993, the single market was completed, which permitted the movement of goods and services, people and money across member states. This is a huge foreshadowing. One of the things we hear in politics is like, we'll put tariffs on them, we'll stop shipping things in, we'll be self-sufficient, right? So when you have allies like this, there's free trade. Your goods can come and go, and it's like there's no borders. The single market was completed and it permitted the movements of goods, services, people, and money across the member states. So they got this little club going on called the EU. 2 years later, Australia, Finland, and Sweden got in the game. That made the members rise to 15 in number. On January 1st, 1999, they launched a currency that exists within the EU. You know what it's called? The euro. Yeah. So, but it was used only for accounting purposes, really. It was all our computers could speak the same language and function within electronic payments. About 3 years later, 2002, coins and banknotes were released in those 12 EU countries, forming a common economic system. They all still use the euro. 2 years later, 10 new countries joined, including Cyprus, Czechia, Estonia, Hungary, Latvia, Lithuania, Malta, Poland, Slovakia, Slovenia. 3 years later, Bulgaria and Romania joined. Finally, in 2013, Croatia became a member, and when the UK left the EU in 2020, it brought the total number of member states to 27. And then in the map below, you see the European Union as of February 2020. That blue. And that blue is what they want to do everywhere. They want the United States, Canada, a ton of pieces of South America. They are trying very hard to get this across the pond. There's a lot of speculation. You can see it covers about a third of ancient Rome. So we see within it the Roman Empire coming back. You lay that map over Alexander the Great's conquest, and some of the best cities are still in there. Remember, we're waiting for a revived Roman Empire to come up. To me, it proves that phase one of the revised Roman Empire is being fulfilled in our day. Though only in its infancy, in its beginning, and not a lot has shifted in the last 4 years, the Roman Empire was decimated, but it's beginning to be revived through the European Union. There's still a lot more to happen, but it's something that I I hear the euro, I hear it going up and down in the market. Those things are all significant, but until big changes happen, we just kind of sit and wait and watch. So possibly through the UN's 17 Goals for Sustainable Development, a 2030 agenda, and the World Economic Forum's Great Reset, which we'll look at in the next session, many more nations are planning to unite, enlarge the territory of the revived Roman Empire. By 2030, all of the economists are at least forecasting we should all be on the same number node. And what that does to our economy, food costs, and all of that is a real setup for socialism and capitalism. So, looking at the ancient Roman Empire on the map, I expect it to stretch from about Spain, through the heartland of Europe, into Turkey, through the center of the Middle East, and perhaps into Iraq. So Spain to Iraq is a previously conquered Roman Empire. So it's possible, with the unprecedented prosperity of the Seventh Kingdom's global economy, many more nations could join the empire. How do we get people in our country to join that? We just say, how much you got in the bank? Okay, you got $1 million in the bank? Well, if you switch over to this economic system, it'll be $1.7 million. And most of the stuff that you buy today will stay the same price. That sounds too good to be true. And you can fly cheaper across the ocean. You can visit more places. You can do business without the issue of individual state tax, because there's a global economic system set up for you. And it makes it a lot easier for people who are going to sit at home and in Scotia and sell goods from all over the world on their Shopify page, and they don't have to worry about paying the Euro tax and paying this and that. It's all the numbers speak to each other. Just anyone in business would see that this makes great sense. Anyone who already has money is going to see that this gives me more money. Anyone that has dreams and aspirations of traveling to other places, those borders are now open and easier for you to travel to. So there's a lot of appeal to getting involved. It makes living in the world a lot easier. And I think that's how it's going to be pitched. I think it's going to be pitched in a way where you're like free to travel. You're free to go. Now you're not just bound by your country. This may be where you live, but you are a citizen of the world. And you deserve to experience all of those other things. And they're going to want you to move around. It's really easy to manipulate people when they're outside of their own culture, because they're there with the naivety, and they're also there to experience things. And so they're open to learning and experiencing, and it's something that you're just not doing when you're here. You live within a standard in your own space and place. So anyway, that's Europa. This is not really new. This actually goes way, way back. Where should we land here? I'll never forget my trip to Germany in October 2017. So this is a letter from a missionary talking about some things that he saw for the first time visiting. It says, when my dad and mom and I spoke at a Bible school in the small German town of Kensington, on the days that we were not speaking, we traveled around the area going to the Swiss House, quaint villages in Germany, and Strasbourg in France. When we went to an old cathedral in a small German town on the border of France and Germany, I was fascinated by an eye-catching statue of a woman riding a bull. And so I sent you guys a picture of that. Later, when we went to the European Union Parliament in Strasbourg, I saw a different version of the same statue. What struck me was the eerie similarity to Revelation 17, where the harlot rides on the back of the beast. After researching this, I learned the woman on the statue was Europa, who, according to Greek mythology, was raped by Zeus. And as the legend goes, Zeus, overwhelmed by her beauty and grace, transformed himself into a bull, seduced her, took her to Crete. There he revealed his true identity, which is where he impregnated her. Europa gave birth to Minos, the eventual king of Crete, and she became the first queen of Crete. Europe, all of Europe, was named after this figure, Europa, and the European Union frequently uses Europa on the back of a bull as a semi-official symbol, sometimes appearing on the euro currency or near a European institution. His final statement is, I was struck by the connection between Revelation 17 and this often used symbol for Europe, especially when factoring in the revived Roman Empire prophesied by Daniel and John. Then, when you consider the revelation given to John of the woman riding on the back of the beast, symbolizing the city of Rome, taken to a worldwide prominence by the Antichrist, it's striking to see the symbol through Europe, confirming what the Bible prophesies. I got a chance to spend some time with his wife a couple days ago. We mentored her in college, and she's a mom, and she still has a strong Norwegian accent, and their job is to set up trips for sort of rich people to travel around the world. They're like global travel agents, and sometimes they get a really rare occasion to get to go try out a new place. So they'll go and stay at a fancy hotel where they're going to book a king or a queen or a magistrate. Kind of a neat life. Not quite for me, but they get to travel and see a lot. And he likes to write. He's a musician. He might come and jam for us next time we're in town. His name is Nick Page. So, it might seem odd, but seeing this connection kind of inspired me to study the European Union. And through all of that, I kind of solidified in my mind that the end-time Babylon is currently rising up. And the ancient Roman Empire is being revived in our day. They're creating their symbols, they're establishing their territory, they're setting up for the economy. We're living in the days that scriptures are being fulfilled. But we're still in the kind of watch and see period of time. Phase 2 is when the 10 kings arise. So people that are really stuck on end time stuff, they're always counting out the kingdoms and waiting for the kings and is it this and is it that. Notice the phrase in Daniel 7:24. It says the 10 kings will arise. This shows a progressive rise to power. So, who are the 10 kings? I sent you a map with all kinds of numbers. It's basically the map of the world. That's not who the 10 kings are, but some have speculated 10 nations in the European Union will rise to prominence. Others believe it's going to be 10 regions of the world. So that kind of is more depicted in the map. This plan was revealed, what I sent you, in 1973 by something called the Club of Rome. It's a globalist political think tank with the express goal of establishing a one world government. Their plan is shown below how this government would be ruled by 10 sectors, or we would say sectors. According to their plan, the 10 regions would include North America, the European Union, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, Eastern Europe, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Russia, and the former countries of the Soviet Union. 6, Central and South America, Cuba, and the Caribbean islands. 7 is Middle East and North America, North Africa. The rest of Africa, except for South Africa. Number 8, so the rest of Africa, basically everything north of South Africa. South and Southeast Asia, including India, and number 10 is China. So other people theorize that 10 nations will be world powers. So that points more towards people sitting on thrones, such as you see in China, America, Russia, just to name a few. Some see the 10 nations as an Islamic federation. That's also very possible. Seeking to conquer the world for Allah. Whatever it ultimately looks like, kings are going to rise to prominence. They're going to align themselves with the Antichrist and his kingdom. And because of the wars, I don't think it covers the whole globe. I don't think it's like 10 parts. Breaking the whole globe up into 10 parts, I don't think that doesn't work for me. Anyway, I could be wrong. Not all of the 10 kings mentioned in Daniel 7:24, not only are they mentioned in 24, but they also appear in Nebuchadnezzar's dream of the statue and Daniel's night vision of the four beasts. We'll do that the next session that I teach. In Nebuchadnezzar's dream, these 10 kings are symbolized by 10 toes of iron mixed with clay. That's one set. In Daniel's night vision, the 10 kings are portrayed as 10 horns of authority on the iron monster. So over 500 years later, John saw the same 10 horns, which are 10 kings, he says in Revelation 17:12. 10 horns, which are 10 kings. Adding further insight, John said that they have not yet received the kingdom, but they received authority as kings with the beast for 1 hour. This likely means that the 10 kings, they don't have governing authority, so that makes it less likely for them to be rulers of nations. Nor do they have dominion until the Antichrist crowns them rulers with him in his 8th empire. So these are going to be like the influencers to get everyone on board. And then as they have been so faithful to their leader, they'll be crowned like kings. Maybe at that point, kings of regions, if we were to just guess. We don't have enough information to know for sure. But in Revelation 13:1, the coronation occurs. It says, when John sees the beast empire rising up out of the sea. Sorry, that's my note on John 13:1. Specifically, John sees the 10 horns crowned with 10 diadems, those are kingly ornaments on the head of the crown, and it means that these 10 kings receive authority with the Antichrist at the beginning of the 8th kingdom. So there's 3.5 years left of the Great Tribulation, and there's this event, coronation, ordination. This likely rules out the theory of the 10 kings being 10 leaders of nations or world regions prior to the rise of the Antichrist. Otherwise, they would have been considered in power already. So there won't be the 10 leaders of the European Union. There won't be 10 world regions necessarily at that time. 10 superpower nations, 10 Islamic nations for the Antichrist ascends to power. So what it does mean, however, is that the 10 kings will rise in international prominence prior to the Antichrist, but they will not have governing authority over a nation or region until they are crowned as kings in the 8th kingdom. So what kind of person is that? An influencer. They could be political, but it also could be popular. Right? Popularity. Who is the most popular? It doesn't necessarily have to be a ruler now, maybe a ruler then. Like, not that she'll be alive or I'm pointing fingers for any particular reason, but let's look at Oprah, for instance. Oprah controls Beyonce. There's a big group there. Think of influencers, people who have lots of following, global following. Have you thought of some people? Yeah. So those people they're going to earn their crown, and they're going to rule the world. Some of them sing songs about it. So, looking again at Daniel 7:24, excuse me, notice the phrase, another will rise after them. This one will speak out against the Most High and wear down the saints of the highest one. That's Daniel 7:25. Speak out against the Most High and wear down the saints of the highest one. They'll make alterations in times and in law. So this undoubtedly describes the Antichrist. He will change the way we are ruled. Now, if the 10 kings arise to international prominence and the Antichrist emerges into the world scene, keep in mind the Antichrist will eventually become king of the 7th and the 8th empire. That's important. There will be an interior battle, but it will be the same leader from the 7th into the 8th. Probably a resurrected version, but we'll get there when we talk just about him. So in Revelation 17:3, the Antichrist will carry the harlot city Rome to global prominence. Most of the world will regard Rome with great affection and admiration. It will be the new Mecca. When the Antichrist rises to power, he will make Rome the city of cities. Whether this means that Rome will be the headquarters of the 7th kingdom, or just revitalized with billions of dollars, I'm inclined to believe that Rome will be the capital city of the 7th kingdom. It will be where you have to report if you are enlisted. But time will tell. With certainty is that Rome will be one of the most beloved cities in the world right before Christ returns. They will love Rome. Whether that brings in the Catholic system or not, probably. They're coming right out of great peace. They're coming out of a time where they're allowing the Jews and the Muslims to get along, where we're all distant Abrahamic cousins. And all of a sudden, this is just a beautiful city of peace and prosperity and history. So when the Antichrist brings Rome to the worldwide stage and the 7th kingdom becomes the apex of its power, the Roman Empire will be fully revived. When it's ready, it will be military in the works. That's not going to come from nowhere. It's going to become the one world government and the one world economy and the one world religion. It will be the world's capital. And this area is likely going to stretch. Right now we're thinking like, go take a tour of Rome and visit that little place. We're not talking about that little place. When I say Rome, in this map, like you mentioned the maps, you're back to the Bible, the little note at the top would say end times Rome, and it would be stretching from Spain to Iraq. So this is the global thing we're talking about when we say Rome. It is what has happened over the 3.5 years of peace, prosperity, and worship. So, the allure of unprecedented wealth, the territory of this kingdom could be bigger. It could swallow up all of Great Britain very easily, all of the wealth of England. It could entice Russia to play nice. Probably not. They're kind of a bully. But if you give them what they want, they might play along for 3.5 years. When the Antichrist rises to power as the king of the 7th kingdom during a time of peace and safety, he's going to establish a peace agreement between Israel and the Islamic world. It involves Christianity, but mostly Catholicism. I think true Christianity is going to go, nope, I know what's going on. So the nations are going to rejoice. They're going to unite on the Temple Mount to worship. You're going to see a great worship movement begin to happen. Supposedly they're all worshiping the same God. Obviously this is not true, but the world is going to believe it. And the world will be jealous of this new church's unity. And they will be proselytizing the world into the new one world religion. So people that you couldn't get to come to church will now be worshiping this new thing in a new way with all new songs. And if possible, to even deceive the elect, your favorite Christian stations will say, here's a new one that was just put out from what we're calling Rome. And it's going to play a song. And you're like, that's such a great song. But it was written by demonic influence. Because it's all leading up to the worship of the Antichrist. And when when the Antichrist, Israel, and the Arab world sign the peace accord, it's going to bring great revival to Judaism in Israel, which is, of course, not a good thing. In the minds of Orthodox Jews, they see this as a miracle from God, allowing them to offer their Levitical sacrifices in the rebuilt temple. But little do they realize that it's going to be a covenant of death, it says in Jeremiah 37, you're signing a covenant of death, ushering in the greatest trial that Israel has ever experienced. This will earn them their scourge. So, I just want to make one last point about this, and then we're going to move quickly to the end. No, it's just a good point. All right. The Roman Empire initially spread out from Rome. The revived empire is going to likely be in reverse. So here's what I mean. The European Union is established first. Then the territory expands through the economic systems, through religion, through government, and this leads to the 10 kings rising up in international prominence, followed by the Antichrist ascending to power. So when the Antichrist makes Rome the headquarters of the empire, the Roman Empire is fully revived. That's a reverse restoration. So where Alexander the Great started off small, got bigger and bigger and bigger, they're getting bigger first, and then they're going to go, we're big and strong, and we're here. So the conquering comes after that. So when we see the unity instead of a war, and the growth through peace instead of conquering, that is the reversal that I'm talking about. Not necessarily spatial. All right. In the middle of Daniel's 70th week, 3.5 years prior to the second coming, the Antichrist will destroy the seventh kingdom and set up the eighth kingdom. John wrote this in 1711, Revelation 17:11. The beast which was and is not is himself also an eighth, and is one of the seven, and he goes to destruction. So the phrase one of the seven, in the Greek, the word one of can also mean out of. So if we take this meaning and we insert it into the text, it reads a little bit better for our understanding. It would say something like, the beast is himself also an eighth, and is out of seven. In other words, the eighth kingdom comes out of the seventh kingdom. Kind of fires his general manager and goes to work. So this is exactly what we see in Revelation 17. When the harlot city Rome, the seventh kingdom, rides on the back of the Antichrist to world prominence, the Antichrist becomes the head of the seventh kingdom through his charisma and his skill, his intelligence. And then 3.5 years before Christ's return, and we do believe these are consecutive 7 years taking place, the Antichrist and 10 kings are going to set Rome on fire. They're going to destroy the seventh kingdom and establish the eighth kingdom. And the eighth kingdom comes out of the seventh kingdom. Again, when I say Rome, we're not just talking about the little place in Italy with the Colosseum. We're talking about this European Union. So they're just going to blow up a bunch of it, I think. In the words of John, the 10 horns which you saw in the beast, these will hate the harlot, and they will make her desolate and naked, and eat her flesh, and will burn her up with fire. For God has put it in their hearts to execute his purpose by having a common purpose, and by giving their kingdom to the beast, until the words of God have been fulfilled. So the Antichrist and the 10 kings, they're going to wage war against Rome. I know, seems odd, but they just can't have peace forever. And they're being, right then, they're being forced to get along with everyone, or they're being told, peace, peace, until you hear the cry. So there's a group inside the group being told, be at peace, stay calm, pretend to get along, sharpen your knives. from the 7th to the 8th kingdom, they reveal themselves. So they destroy the beloved city, which in turn decimates the global utopia. The one world religion of tolerance, love, and unity will be replaced by totalitarian religion. This is the part where we see in Old Testament prophecies like, woe to the one who is with child, right? And running for the hills. Because all of a sudden, they're like, there's a reward out for Christians, and the spirit that drove Paul, when he was called Saul, working for the Jews to kill Christians, that Antichrist spirit will be alive in the earth. And it will be coming for you. You can stand at the door and watch. So this is a time that we don't love to think about, but we embrace. We're also told that in this time, there will be martyrs of the faith. They have a specific mention for resurrection, that they're resurrecting the martyrs of the Great Tribulation, clothed in righteousness and white linen. So when the period begins, God will give the Antichrist reign over many nations for 42 months. So this is a 3.5-year period. When that begins, the Antichrist and 10 kings go forth. Revelation 6:2 says they go forth conquering to conquer. That means like they don't just pillage, they burn the whole thing down. This coalition is going to attempt to subdue by force, and in all likelihood the nations which align themselves with the 7th kingdom will be enemies. So meaning that you're going to wage relentless war from Europe to Iran. So they just made a bunch of friends, and then they're going to keep their enemies closer than a brother. They're going to stab them in the back. For the sake of what? For the sake of one last great worldwide attempt from Satan to rule the world and gain worship. Not just rule the world. Remember what he fell for. There is worship and music woven into his very being. And he desires it to sit higher. He wants to be seated higher, even just for a day. He wants the worship. He wants the affection. It is driving him mad. So it's not just ruling, and there's laws and rules, and they want to kill me. But there's also forced worship. And so how is that going to look for those that aren't needing any persuasion? How's it going to look for those that already worship the beast? They already have songs. They don't play them for the world. And people will jump, and they'll dance, and they'll be drunk, and it'll be, you can imagine, endless pleasure for a temporary body leading to a permanent death, eternal death. So, this is a demonically energized federation through their formidable military and endeavor to conquer the territory of the ancient Rome, Greece, Persia, and Babylonian empires. It's confirmed in Revelation 13:2 when John saw the Antichrist kingdom as a leopard, and his feet were like those of a bear, and his mouth was like the mouth of a lion. And as this verse reveals, the 8th kingdom is going to conquer the territory occupied by ancient Greece. That's the leopard. And Persia is the bear, and Babylonian is the lion. So when they start to go forth to conquer and to conquer, they are going to be taking land. That is enticing for people like Putin. All right, just got our video flag. There's people out there that want to rule land and people. They want riches. They want authority. I don't entirely understand the thirst for power, but they want it. They want that power. And I think ultimately at the core is the Antichrist spirit that desires worship. All all of these people call me their king, something like that. So, the statue on its feet of iron and clay, which is the Antichrist's final empire, it will crush at the same time the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold. That's Daniel 2:35. So this means that the Antichrist is going to have dominion over the same area occupied by ancient Rome. And therefore, the Antichrist's final world empire is likely going to stretch across the map from Spain to Iraq. So it's all of the Middle East, all of Europe. Daniel 7:7 and Daniel 7:19 also confirm this. The last empire is going to devour, crush, and trample the remainder of its feet. The remainder likely refers to the territory of Babylonian, Persia, and Greece, the Greek empires. So the Antichrist and the 10 kings will dominate the European and Arab world just prior to Jesus' return. How do you do that without nuclear weapons? I don't know. But I'm pretty sure they're going to try to set a few off. We know that in terms of population, right before the Lord returns, about a third of the world is going to get wiped out. I think that's probably going to happen right around the 3.5-year mark when that global war breaks out. I don't even want to call it World War III. We might have one left in us before all of this unfolds. We'll see. So, not only will they conquer the territory, but they're going to replace the economy. They're going to produce unprecedented prosperity, but it's through the mark of the beast. So everyone who refuses to take this mark will be unable to buy and sell. Revelation 13:17. The mark of the beast is 13:16. It's their control mechanism. You can control someone with their wallet. The mark will be a signal to the world that a person has pledged their undying allegiance, to the Antichrist and his empire. So, can't do that on accident or by surprise. Jesus is coming to crush the Antichrist. There's a lot left here. So, let me skip ahead. With the breath of his mouth, it brings him to an end by the appearance of his coming. This is 2 Thessalonians 2:8. Maybe I can switch over to my other notes that are much bigger. I'm looking at this little print. Sorry. That's better. Jesus returns and slays him with the breath of his mouth, or the word of his mouth. John records the future war between the Antichrist and the 10 kings with Jesus Christ and his army of overcoming believers, stating that the Antichrist and 10 kings will wage war against the Lamb, and the Lamb will overcome them because he is the Lord of lords and King of kings. Revelation 17:14, Lord of lords and King of kings. And Daniel saw the same thing symbolized by a stone. It was cut out without human hands. Remember? And then it was striking the 10 toes at the statue, crushing it. So Jesus Christ will effortlessly, with the breath of his mouth, annihilate the leaders of the empire. So he's going to do it in a creative word manner. Or maybe he'll actually breathe. I don't know. He can do whatever he wants. I'm going to be hiding behind him going, kill him. Maybe not. I probably won't have any more fear. So, talk about feet and the toes. Phase 5, the Antichrist subdues the 3 kings. So, kind of a neat thing woven into the story is Jesus returns, wages war against the Antichrist, and we still got some details happening. So it's like, maybe it doesn't happen in a flash, where he comes back and poof, I missed it, and now they're gone, and the bad guys are gone, and now it's like, when this war happens, we're going to be kind of watching it, but from a heavenly place. Or maybe we're going to be given an assignment and be behind him, waging war with him. Most of the battle images that we see in Isaiah are just him, but it could be representative of all of the body. So at some point during the 8th kingdom, the Antichrist will subdue the three of the 10 kings as he attempts to bring the entire world under his regime. I sent another little graph where it shows the different phases that we've been talking about. At the very end of the 3.5 years, the Antichrist and 7 kings is all that's left over in the 8th kingdom. I believe it takes place at the midpoint of Daniel's 70th week, 3.5 years before Jesus, for phase 4. That's the Antichrist and 10 kings. And then in that time period, when he's waging war on the earth, that is when we see the elimination of I think it's probably annihilation of 3 kingdoms. Or like a big bomb takes out a whole lot of people. And because it destroys the harlot with fire. So, as I said in phase 4, this takes place at the midpoint of the 70th week. Here's why. We have to realize a lot of John's visions take place during the day of the Lord. And that is kind of an ambiguous phrase. At the beginning of the book, John wrote, I was in the Spirit on the Lord's day. That doesn't mean that John was in the Spirit on the Sabbath or on Sunday. It is the great and mighty day of the Lord. This is like a time period, the day of the Lord. So John was taken by the Spirit into the events known in Scripture as the day of the Lord. The Old Testament prophets and the New Testament epistles refer to the day of the Lord several times. It's not a 24-hour period of time. It begins somewhere after the 3.5 year point, before the end of the age. So during the last half of Daniel's 70th week, the day of the Lord refers to the 3.5 years of God's judgment upon the nations. So we're forgetting that he is God pouring out judgments by removing his hand. So the Antichrist is doing all this stuff, but it is God's judgment. It is not his patience running out, but his timing being made perfect. I heard one person say, God's timing is so perfect, he's waiting for the end times to be so bad, for him to pour out the judgment and answer the prayers for all of those people who were hurt and crying out to God. And their prayer, their question is, why didn't God do anything? And the biblical answer is because he's patient, but not because he forgot. And when he pours out his judgment, all of the wrath of every raped child, all of the wrath of every murdered innocent being, all of the wrath and the judgment of every wrongdoing that has ever occurred to you, everything that has ever been done where you've cried out and God was storing up his wrath and his judgment on the nations and the people and the generations is going to be poured out in this time period. You say, how can that be fair? Because the cross dealt with everyone's sins in that other day of the Lord. We don't have the capacity to understand eternity, like we don't have the capacity to understand what's fair. But we think we do. We say things like, that's not fair. But fair and just are not the same. God will make it right. And we'll understand when we have his mind, when we're given the mind of Christ, we'll understand when we're there with him, behind him, and we will have this moment of, now I totally get it. And we'll be able to see those hard-hearted people that would never want to turn to him, that need to be removed. Probably about 3 more pages of historical notes and references you guys can try to access when I get the time to put it on Teachable. But for now, Let's end with great hope and expectation. Jesus, I pray right now that something said in the last hour and a half would spark something in our hearts. Maybe a new idea was presented or a new truth was unveiled. I ask that it would take seed in our heart and produce great fruit. Would we not forget that we are trained to be harvesters, expected to go into the fields and bring out a great harvest. Lord, I pray in a world with so many weeds, we would find the seeds, we would cultivate them and protect them. We would sow seeds ourselves with great expectation for their growth. We would be involved in the process, not just sitting in our rocking chairs watching from the porch, but we would get out into the fields and participate. Help us to not bury our talent, that we would see with the eyes of heaven as everything begins to unfold. Never for a moment would we react or recoil in fear, but we would take the warnings to heart. We would know the times. We would just decipher the times. And we would be able to divide the Word of God and rightly understand it. We would study to show ourselves approved, so that when this great and terrible day comes, we're ready for you to receive us. Lord, I pray for protection over our minds and our hearts, that fear would not creep in, but that we would be open to you, filling us once again tonight, Lord. In the Spirit of God, say, come.
Just exit.
Yeah.